Hey, live at 85. Will not strive, busy as a beehive. This is Jim Hausman. Come on into the law office. We're going to talk about Jesus. We're going to do some advanced estate planning for you. Sophisticated estate planning because you're going to die. You're not going to die now, but you're going to die for certain. This is my law office. All those Bragamoni pictures, Harvard, Michigan. Those are the schools I went to. Harvard Divinity School. I studied the Dead Sea Scrolls a long time ago with the foremost scholars, Cross and Wright, Frank Cross, G. Ernest Wright. They had studied under Albright at Johns Hopkins. This is an active law office, so you're going to hear emails coming in, bing, bing. The phone might go off. Don't worry about it. Try to learn. We've got the television in the back there muted. You see it? So that's not going to bother us. I don't have the French Open on, just financial news. There was a jobs report this morning. Affected the market a little bit, but not so badly. I'd say it's June 3rd, Friday. It's about noon. 2002, 2022, noon Eastern Standard Time. Some of you are watching this in different time zones, so I point that out. Well, God bless you all in Jesus. That's the reality of life. You got to learn to deal with Jesus and his words. Although we're not going to flood you with scriptures today, we're going to continue a program that we did yesterday on one of the great preachers who's somewhat in repose, retirement, on his farm, 6 acres in Oregon City, just outside of Portland. His name, James Weber. His game, I don't know if I want to even define it. But he writes books. He's written 10 books. I've shown them to you before. And he likes to get up close to students. And can you see that well? He's preaching before a couple hundred students with a signboard. Probably a sin checklist on his chest. This is in Vegas, in front of the Bellagio Hotel. After all, you're nobody if you have not been to the Bellagio for brunch, as I took him and some other people once. Because we'd preached with Reuben Israel New Year's night before, and it was a drunken brawl. We all had to lockstep and protect each other from directions we couldn't see. We got through it. Yep. I have to background every show because some people only say one show. Name, James Ellsman. Born in Kalamazoo, Michigan. The eldest of 7 children, to James and Dorothy. My dad was a salesman for a paper company because we actually lived in a small town outside of Kalamazoo called Parchment. Parchment. We made parchment paper. Our company had mastered the process of printing on wax paper. Sounds simple, but those bread wrappers you get, you never think about them. They're just there. They have to be printed. Yeah, I worked there 5 summers. Midnight shift. You ever worked midnight shift before? It's pretty rough. You have to sleep during the heat of the day. And these were all summers. And that's what's called working production. This was back in the day when I was unionized and I only made $2.15 an hour. And it was dangerous work. I still have scars on me from sulfuric acid that the paper was processed through to harden it so it wouldn't break as it was being processed before it was being cut into individual purposes. Yeah. And the sulfuric acid used to eat the clothes that I wore. I had to wear wool clothes because wool was most resistant to sulfuric acid. So I'd come home in the morning after the midnight shift. The neighbors would be laughing at me. I looked like a hobo. I needed the money. They put me through school. Plus, I had a paper route from 7 to 17, wherefrom I saved $8,000. Well, sounds like a lot of money, and it was a lot of money in those days. But $8,000 over 7 years, or 10 years, I guess. About $1,000 a year. I got it down to the point where I just had to collect on Saturday. But it's never so simple. Some people are not home on Saturday. Some people are hiding from you on Saturday. Some people are skips. They're not even in their house anymore. They're trying to screw the paper boy out of a few bucks. So I learned a lot about life. And when I went away to college at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor from Kalamazoo, 150 miles, I had to give up the paper route. So I said to my parents, I'll sell it to my brothers and sisters. They said, no, you won't. You will give it to them. I said, well, I've got accounts receivable out there, collections I hadn't made. They said, well, you better go collect them. So I hustled, got most of them, but what I didn't get, passed on to the brothers and sisters that took over the route and carried it on for another 10 years. So the Ellsmans in Parchment, Michigan were famous for having the paper route. And when people didn't get a Sunday paper in the middle of February, guess what number they called? My mother's number. And she drove me out. So my blessed mother helped me, and my dad helped me, and my brothers and sisters helped me. It wasn't a solo thing. Yeah, the papers were delivered right to my front yard. Boom, boom. I think the route was about 300. That's a lot of collecting. And I was an athlete, so I like to play ball with my buddies on Sunday. Oh, I'm getting off track here. Gotta have a drink. As some who view this regularly know, this is my beer. IBC root beer. Little do they know they get free advertising. Address, Jim Ellsman, 725 South Adams, Suite 182, Birmingham, Michigan, not Georgia. Birmingham, Michigan, 48009. I don't repeat it. You have to watch another day. Phone 248-766-5184. Don't call now because I'm on the air. This is live. And don't call from Pakistan, as one guy did, and reverse the charges on me. I wouldn't take that call, probably, unless it was presented. I'm in a jail in Pakistan. I'm an American. I'm unjustly jailed. I'm a lawyer. I've heard all the stories. Famous lawyer in my own mind. I was the highest paid in my law class at the University of Michigan in 1962. Yeah, I did a few things as undergrad too. Snuck into Cuba, got a story in the mountains, trying to see Fidel Castro. I was not successful. I was jailed, almost shot by a Thompson submachine gun pointed right at my chest. Driven at night in a Jeep to Moncado Barracks. You can read about it if you do some Google research on me. That was spring of 58. In the fall of 57, I snuck into Little Rock Central High when Eisenhower, president then, former general of U.S. forces in the Normandy landings, World War II. You say you're surprised that I go back that far? Hey, listen, buddy, I was alive at 5. Alive at 5, I like it. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941. And Mom was crying, and Dad had 7 kids, or was going to have 7 kids. It was not a happy occasion. But I also lived to see VE Day, victory over the Nazis in Europe, and VJ Day, victory over Japan in Asia. Yeah, I've been to Hiroshima. I've played tennis in Japan in tournaments. I've been all over the world. Even some of the great worldwide preachers cannot match my story of going to Indonesia, the world's largest Muslim country, preaching Jesus. It took me 2 days to get there with a stopover in Singapore, the best airlines in the world. So from Singapore to Jakarta, Indonesia, was a very pleasant time. Good food, good waitresses, stewardesses, but they serve food. Okay. Email ellsmanlawfirm@aol.com. Hey. Well, I've spilled my guts. Here we go. We're continuing on with the story of James Weber, a man who was originally illiterate. In other words, he didn't know how to read or write. One of my best friends. He'll want me to say his best friend. Hey, I've got some options. He lives in Oregon City, Oregon, just outside of Portland. I'll tell you some stories about it because he insists upon it, frankly. I talked about him yesterday on tape. He wasn't happy. You didn't say enough about me. I'm going to tell it like it is. That's the nature of this program. You deal with me, buddy. You better deal straight or you're going to see it the next day. I had promised another preacher, Bobby Biblestein is his name. Can you imagine a guy with a name like that? Bobby Biblestein. I guess he claims to be Jewish, or his father was Jewish. His real name is Bob Engel, like Marx and Engels, close to that. I promised him that I would give him this day to have the program focus on him and his achievements. He's very creative for Jesus. Leaves an advertising for Jesus on his cars, preaching on roadways. But Dr. Weber would be disappointed if I gave him too much time. Today, Dr. Weber, I forget when we first met, it was roughly around 22 years ago. So let's say the year 2000. Because we had in common friendship with Holy Hubert Lindsay, he invited me out to his Corbett, Oregon ranch. Nice little spread. Hilly, overlooking the city of Portland. He invited me to preach to a gathered group of, I don't know, maybe 150 when the kids were counted. And people just came and camped out on his land, pooped and peed all over the place. It was not well organized, but hey, he was a host, and to assume the duties of feeding that many people is quite commendable, even if they paid a fair share. So we had night bonfires and stories and daytime preaching. It was a lot of fun. And he invited me, since I was a speaker, to stay in his main ranch house, along with Paul Mitchell and his wife at that time, and he and his wife, Jim Weber, and Tony, his wife. Yeah, he was bragging about his daughter, Joy. I get these names a little bit confused when I'm 85, but I think I got them right. She was a famous basketball player, high school. Once sank 56 straight free throws in competition. I took her on at the basketball court on his land, and I muscled her in the paint and beat her. I couldn't beat anybody in his family anymore at 85, because that was 22 years ago. And now she has 3 children, all of whom are great athletes. Andre, Dion, and Love, the grandchildren of James Weber. He dotes on them, and some say too much, but who am I to judge? I just want to tell you some stories about our preaching. Once he came to my ranch up in northern Michigan. It was over a mile square, 800 acres. And we decided one day to have our Sunday dinner at this restaurant. There were probably about 50 people in the restaurant, maybe more. Little town called Atlanta, Michigan, not Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta, Michigan. And all of a sudden, we told Tony to go get her guitar. We were going to sing. So we started singing Amazing Grace, standard fare of Christianity, right in the restaurant. And the waitresses were very concerned. We saw the owner. He came out, he looked, didn't do anything. It's almost like angels kept them back. And all of a sudden, patrons in the restaurant got up and started coming toward us. What did they come toward us for? To drop $20 right at our feet. They were tipping us. They loved it. They could tell that story the rest of their days. A Christian service within a restaurant. Hey, this Weber is no angel. I can tell you a Greek restaurant story. Yep. Well, the first story was about how we got to know each other. And when I went out there to preach in the mountains above Portland. As things developed, he came to Michigan. And we ended up, after we did a TV broadcast, I believe, maybe 11 o'clock at night, at a Greek restaurant. You know, the usual souvlaki, avgolemono soup, and an old Greek man that owned the place. Well, everything was peaceful, but there was a table of teenagers. And so Weber starts passing out tracts, Christian tracts, how to get saved by Jesus, whatever. And then he tries to stimulate crowds of people. He's an expert at the psychology thereof. And he says, why didn't that one guy take a tract? And he focuses on this one guy who starts to get irate because we're putting social pressure on him. And all of a sudden, chairs are sliding back. People are getting ready to fight. Weber wasn't ready to fight. He just wanted to talk to those people. And this old Greek man that owned the place, he didn't know what to do. He was wringing his hands in a physical way, actual physical. Boys, boys, boys. Well, we calmed it down. I don't think any blows were struck, but there was a lot of preparation. Then there was another time in my hometown, just a mile away from what I've just described. We decided to jump some teenagers that are getting ready to go to a movie. Their parents are dumping them off on a Friday night. Like, let's get rid of those kids so we can get in bed. It's been a long week. Enough said. So we've got this monster guy called Jeremiah, former arm wrestling champion of the world, and NFL, or at least a college All-American. So we marched right through their little gathered gang outside of the ticket line. And they get scared and they cell phone their parents. Their parents come over in cars, and let's just say it's a scene. Parents call cops. Cops arrive. They immediately take Weber into the police car, try to lessen the pressure. I say, "Hi, I'm their lawyer. I practice law right here in this town." They say, "Yeah, we know you." And then we're about ready to cool the whole thing. And one of our members named Jim Gillis, he lays out his hands and say, "You didn't arrest me yet." It just escalated again. Oh, well, they go and arrest Jim Gillis. I talk to the cops and I say, "Hey, look, let's make a deal here where everybody wins. I'll get these idiots out of town." I had to talk that way about my fellow preachers. They've been preaching Jesus like you're going to die someday and you better decide now whether you go to heaven or hell. I say, "I'll get him out of town. You won't see this again. I'll guarantee it with my lawyer reputation." They agreed to it because they didn't know what to do. Arrest 7 or 8 of us. And we smoothed that over. I don't think Weber ever came back to town again. I didn't invite him. We did a lot of preaching at the University of Michigan. Sometimes we were upstaged even by our own buddies, like Jeremiah. He drew a larger crowd than Weber and myself. And maybe Tony was there too. But one time we were preaching right at the Michigan M, the Diag. I was dressed in a judge's robe. It was my job to prosecute the students. So I said things like, "These students, they're having sex all the time as fornicators. They're non-believers. They believe in evolution." And Weber was their defense lawyer, the way we set up the whole thing. So Weber gets up, and I think that he's going to calm the whole situation. And he says, "I know what the problem is. I know what the problem is." So the crowd quiets and turns to Weber. He said, the fault with these students is with their parents." Well, I was hoping that he would calm the situation. These students, you couldn't have said anything worse to them. They love their parents. Their parents were paying their tuition, paying their spending money. We were lucky we got out of that. We were attacked. Well, I know Bobby Bible is very upset that I've bleeped him out of the whole program today. We'll get him tomorrow. It's Saturday, but I'll come to the office. I owe it to the guy. He's taken a lot of blows lately. Isolated with his computer. He's not very mobile because, $7 gas out in Joshua Tree, California, $6, whatever it is. It's highest in the nation. And for that guy not to be traveling is amazing because he's gone all over, a lot to Sin City, Vegas. The Oscars every year for, who knows, 35, 40 years. He hits campuses. He's a jack of all trades. You'll find that these preachers tend to specialize, as I will introduce them to you. But today it's just Jim Weber, author of 10 books, does a great job with his grandchildren and his children. I hope he's found all of his children. There was one child that popped up, and he was a rich man in Chicago, as I recall. Investment banker. Well, we've all had our wild sides, sown our wild oats, and the Adamic nature is still with us. But God is faithful and compels us to preach. If we didn't preach, we would die. I'm just shooting straight with you. That's how serious it is within our spirits. Lord, help us. Jesus' death on the cross compels us, and his resurrection.